You know, it's funny, like stand still and you put on the shoe, you're like, okay, that feels different. And then I started moving and I was like, whoa. With the Boston 12, did Adidas finally figure out how to make a race shoe that works for anybody? So just a quick disclaimer before we get deeper into it. I am an REI employee and these shoes were provided for review, but the opinions I'm gonna be expressing are all based on my experience in the shoes. So the first Boston I got in was the Boston 10. It was a couple of years ago at this point, and I didn't really consider myself a road runner. And then, it had such an iconic name, so I wasn't really sure what to expect from the shoe, but I put the shoe on and immediately I fell in love with the shoe. And honestly, I fell in love with that style of running, whatever that was. I was like, wow, there's lots of energy return. I can go out for a while. It just felt different than shoes that I had experienced with lots of cushion underfoot that let me sink into my step a little bit more. Then I got the Boston 11s, and the 11s were really cool, but they certainly were a pared down upper. And I was like, whoa, this feels like a faster shoe now. There were some things that I still understood that I loved about the shoe. Obviously, the ride of the shoe and the midsole kind of felt pretty similar. There was slight differences in the energy return I felt, which was getting faster. I was also getting more and more comfortable with road running, which was kind of interesting. And then move into the Boston 12s. I hadn't been in the Bostons in a couple weeks. I was rotating through other shoes and really focusing on experiences from other shoes. But this morning, I got a chance to put them on immediately after running a couple miles in some squishier shoes, some shoes that had a little bit more cushion, that softer EVA foam, I guess I would say. And as soon as I put these on, it's funny, like stand still and you put on the shoe, you're like, okay, that feels different. And then I started moving and I was like, whoa, I feel like I have springs under my feet. Like they just started moving a lot faster. I felt like my turnover could be faster. Also felt like I was moving faster for less effort. With other shoes, you have to work a little bit harder. And with these, you just feel motivated because it feels like you have mechanical advantage. There's just like, whoa, there's lots of things under my feet that are helping me move in that way. So even though it was the second half of the run, it certainly felt like I could just go forever and kind of go at that speed. So yeah, really, really stoked to kind of spend more time in these and remind myself of why I fell in love with the experience. So if we take a look at the Boston 12s from top to bottom, the first thing that you'll notice is the upper, right? It's like that bright high vis upper, which is really cool. When you put your hands on it or get your feet in there, it feels exactly how it looks. It's like pretty structurally engineered, right? Like there's not moving anywhere. This is the opposite of a sock like knit upper, right? Where you get a ton of stretch. Here, you don't really get a lot of stretch. You're in there and you're kind of locked in there. Towards the front part of the shoe, you do have like a light overlay there. But for most of the shoe, it's pretty airy. You can actually see my fingers through there. You can usually see your feet through there. So you feel a lot of that kind of air moving through, and it just gives you that lighter feel in there. The volume of the shoe is pretty standard, but you're gonna be kept in place on the top part of the shoe with the tongue, but you also have like a wraparound reinforcing the eyelets on the lateral and the medial side. Helps keep you locked in, but it's like really minimal. Again, it's one of those things where you can cut weight, but you can keep the structure there. If you move to the collar, there's actually some padding just on the side of the collar, which is awesome. And it kind of fades out in the heel, which is interesting. So again, just really strategic cushioning where you need it and cutting the weight in that space. The heel, it's got that cool little fin thing that I love, like a pull tab kind of. And then you can kind of collapse the top part of the heel, but on the back, you have a little bit of that reinforcement there to give you that heel counter, give you a little bit more of that structure. The midsole is kind of made up of three components. The top layer is the Light Strike Pro, which is going to be a little bit of a softer foam. The bottom layer is actually going to be the Light Strike 2.0, which gives you a little bit more of that energy return. And then in the middle there, you got these carbon rods. You can kind of see it here on this side. You can also, if you turn the shoe upside down, see the carbon rods through there. And essentially what that does is it gives you like the sandwich of, again, cushion and energy return that for me just feels like you got springs on your feet, which is pretty awesome. So they're really intentional with that stuff, and it's kind of cool to see how many layers you can get in there and how well it all works. If we look at the outsole itself, you can see that most of it's got the rubber over it. That's the Continental rubber. We have a little bit of exposed light strike, but not a ton. And the Continental rubber is just going to keep you sticking to the ground no matter what the conditions are. So let's take a look at some of the updates from the 11 to the 12. The shoes look pretty similar, but there's a few callouts that are, I think, really interesting to highlight. The first one is the upper. Really what they did on the upper was that they removed lots of overlays. They've kind of condensed things like from the tongue wrap that just go straight to the eyelets to using kind of TPU coating on there, make it lighter, just make it less frills, really trimming down a lot of the stuff that wasn't necessary down there. Another call out is that the stiffness in the heel has been a little bit more reduced. The midsole is pretty similar. It's a little harder to tell on there, but there's still that kind of like sandwich piece there. And again, a big part of that midsole is those rods that you actually see on the outsole. On here, they're green, on here, they're black. But you still got that kind of like sandwich technology to kind of pop back up. It does feel like the Light Strike Pro top layer here is a little bit softer. And on the outsole, again, pretty similar story, but you'll notice that there's a few cutouts actually here where they put some of the outsole and where they put some of the rubber, I should say, and how they cut out the outsole itself. Overall, I just feel like this shoe is getting lighter. It just feels like more and more what most people and myself would consider a race shoe. You know, it's always been a fun shoe to kind of move through and kind of put faster miles in. But now it just feels like, yeah, this is the shoe that I can train in and run on race day in. So it's really exciting to see the Boson move into that category. You know, the Boson 12s, it's one of those things where it's like, it should feel a little bit like home when I put my foot in, but it feels a little bit different, right? Like this is a more sleek, kind of trimmed down upper, but because it has less frills in it, it does feel good. It feels unencumbered, which is nice. It doesn't feel like it's roomy, in my opinion. It just feels kind of not exactly like a race shoe, what most people consider a race shoe. It still has a little bit more volume than perhaps like a speedier race shoe. And I do think it feels more akin to what like most daily trainers can feel like. It gives you a little bit of that width, but you just don't have a lot of room to kind of move around once you get in there. You know, the laces and the tongue, they're pretty thin, and I always think it's funny when shoes kind of go that thin with laces and when tongues get that thin. But for a shoe like this where everything is pretty thin and everything is pretty slimmed down, it just feels like it adds to that, it just complements that. I do usually tend to wear a little thicker socks with this shoe just to kind of prevent that pressure from coming down on my foot because everything is so slim. So it does feel like there is a noticeable difference in where the heel counter is. I felt like with the 11s, I could feel that stiffness there. And on the 12s, I feel a little bit more nimble and a little bit less pressure built up in there. That midsole combo of Light Strike Pro, the energy rods, and the Light Strike 2.0, I mean, it's awesome. I love feeling that underfoot. I mean, it just feels like, again, you're just bouncing up and down. When I'm in the shoe, I literally think of like a cartoon with little bed springs underneath their feet and just kind of bouncing up and down. Like, it's just really fun. It's really comfortable. At least for, you know, the beginning of the run, right? Then it's up to you, like, how long do you want to keep trying this hard? But the shoe's not going to discourage you, right? Like, it helps you do some of that work. And I think it's like one of those things when you need a friend to motivate you to get through your workout, like, this could be that friend, right? Like, it's just kind of pushing there along with you and it's just helping you out, always kind of keeping you up. The outsole, you know, up here in the Northwest, things are wet a lot. It's always funny how many times I hear people say like, can you believe it's raining again? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I can believe that. So with so much rain, it's kind of nice to have some of that sticky rubber on there, the Continental grip. Like I'm jumping over a lot of stuff. The sidewalks are uneven. Like, you know, I tend to go on some of like the city park trails, sometimes even as part of my road run. So it's kind of nice to know that this stuff is going to keep me grounded to a lot of that. It's also interesting that it's got like little cutouts in between on the forefoot pad even or in the midfoot part. I think it just helps it grip a little bit more. It's almost like that trail traction and gives you a little bit more of that versatility. So it makes me really, really curious to where the 13 will go, if it'll get even slimmer and faster than that. But I really liked the 10, maybe even more than the 11, but the 12 might be the one that kind of takes the cake for me just because like it's super fun. And as I'm getting more interested in, you know, training intentionally for races, and I should say as I'm doing it more, I'm past the interest phase. Now I'm doing it, and like this is the thing that's going to keep me motivated on that training journey and stay like motivated on those like speed workout days, on those longer workout days. So I got about 43 miles in this shoe, and like I mentioned before, I'll put the shoe on when I have a specific goal in mind, and that goal is usually not longer runs. It's usually to feel a little bit faster, to try a little bit harder. I've been really, really kind of embracing this idea of slow distance running for the majority of my training. So, you know, the zone 1, zone 2 kind of runs. This shoe is a shoe that's going to push me outside of that. So on the like 25, 30% of my runs that I'm not doing those things, then I'll reach for a shoe like this that'll kind of, I know that it's going to be higher turnover. I want my cadence to be faster. I want to work on my speed. I want to make sure that I can like, work on my form and my breathing while I'm trying a little bit harder. So these shoes are going to be the shoes that I'm going to kind of wear a little bit more for those things. They're also going to be the shoes that I'm going to pick up and kind of wear towards the end of my training cycle as I get closer to the marathon. So when I'm trying to do some marathon pace stuff, or I'm thinking about what that might look like, what that might feel like, then I'll reach for these shoes because I am going to wear these shoes for my next marathon, and it's exciting to think about them in that way. So it's interesting, right? Lots of people would say like, yeah, you have a race shoe and then you have all these other shoes you train in. And I kind of never understood that. But now I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, I love wearing these shoes and they're really awesome. But as I embrace like slower distance running, it's weird to spend less and less time in these. But when I put them on, they're just super exciting. And again, I know that like I have that goal in mind, and the goal is, to try to see what that training stimulus does for me. It helps me run a little bit faster. It helps me run a little bit easier, hopefully, right? I'm doing all these slow distance running so that my faster, harder runs can be a little bit easier. So it's kind of nice to see the training stimulus in that. And it's almost like that rewarding run, for me anyways. When I put these on, I'm like, oh yeah, great. I'm trying a little bit harder, and the shoes are like, we got you, we'll help you out. So yeah, it's exciting to know that. And yeah, I can't wait to try them for my upcoming marathon and see how they feel. I think the Boston 12s are going to be great for lots of different types of folks that run. If you are somebody that is new to running and is like maybe kind of getting into speed work, I think the shoe is going to be awesome for that. It's a speedy shoe, it's a springy shoe, and you can kind of test the waters to see how you feel about using that on some of your harder workouts. If you're the type of person that's getting really intentional about marathon training, even half marathon training, and need something for race day, kind of like introducing it towards the end of your training cycle, the shoe is awesome. I mean, it's a shoe that certainly you can wear on some of your marathon pace training days, and is still going to be comfortable on your marathon because, again, it gives you that cushion, plus it gives you the energy return. Like, it's just a great combo for that. So really intentional folks around training, I think this is going to be an awesome shoe for you. If you're the type of person that is just not excited about running anymore and you're like, man, running is whatever, like this shoe is going to be great. Like maybe this is the thing that you need. You need something that maybe doesn't give you the cushion. Maybe you've got the comfort. Like what you need is a little bit of a jolt. And like this shoe is going to give you a little bit of like, yeah, just a little bit of that jolt. You can see right there, right? Those little carbon rods are just going to pop you right back up. So I think this shoe is going to be interesting and exciting for lots of different folks. The one thing I'll say about this shoe is that, even though it's got some carbon elements in it, it's a really comfortable carbon shoe, right? Like there are carbon shoes that I would not feel comfortable after a couple miles. They're meant for some workouts. They're meant for folks that are, pushing their pace much faster than I am. I'm not motivated by that necessarily a ton. But like this shoe is just really comfortable. It gives you that energy return. And they do it in such a way where the carbon isn't the focus of the shoe, but it certainly is still the star. So it's like really interesting where you're like, what? It's feeling so great. And you're like, oh, it's the carbon in the shoe. So I think the shoe is going to fit in for a lot of people that are digging their runs or trying to progress through their training cycles, or again, just trying to get a little bit more excitement out of their runs. So that's my review of the Adidas Boston 12s, but I'd love to hear from you all. Have you been in previous versions of the Boston? What do you think of the updates? What do you use for race day? Leave a comment below, I'd love to read them.
You look at a spring. It's wild, dude. Like